Everyone, my name's Embry Dowling. Currently, I work at Holiday Inn Club Vacations as a corporate services training intern. Um, I am in my last semester at UCF as part of the Instructional Design and Technology MA with a track in e-learning. I've always worked well in a team, but I do like to communicate often, so we usually share phone numbers and just kind of text back and forth about assignments. And one interesting fact about myself is I like to garden, and I have about 8 raised garden beds in the front and back lawn. A little bit about my work experience. I'm an instructional designer right now. That's part of the job of being a corporate services trainer. And I basically meet with different departments and see where their training need is, and then work with them to create training for whatever need that is. So for example, right now we're opening a new building on John Young Parkway, and I'm creating the new building orientation. So all 750 or so employees that are going to that building are going to go through my new building orientation. And that's just about like safety, procedures, amenities the building has. And then I met with different department leaders to coordinate a representative from each department. So I'll take the class on a tour and we'll meet each representative of each department, and they'll basically go over what their department does and how they can communicate with each other, just so we can help to break down some of those silos that you usually see in corporations. I wouldn't say this is past experience, but usually while I'm working, sometimes on the weekends or afternoons, I'll do a little bit of contract work in instructional design whenever I can get the opportunity. So for example, like my last contract job was for United Against Poverty Orlando, and the leader was doing a seminar to benefactors to raise money for the organization, and so I built out his PowerPoint and talking points and that kind of stuff. And I also was a undergrad in English education at UCF a few years ago. And so as part of that program, I interned at Maitland Middle School and kind of took over a classroom for a semester. And that's when I first started getting into instructional design, was creating lessons for my classroom there. And that's kind of when I fell in love with it. I love to facilitate, and I still get to facilitate in my role now. That's one of my favorite parts, is that I can create training and take it all the way through into implementation and facilitation. But I didn't want to have my main role as facilitation, so that's why I went into instructional design. In terms of my knowledge in systematic design, I didn't know too much about that term, so I did some research and read the first chapter or two in the book, and I can see that it's a design process or design model, kind of similar to ADDIE or SAM or SURE or any of those models. Personally, I use a revised SAM model when I'm at work because I do a lot of trainings and I have a lot of different projects going at once, and a lot of them are individual projects because there's only 2 corporate services training interns. So I don't really have the time or the resources to do something like systematic design or something like ADDIE, for example. So I do a revised kind of shortened SAM version. But I have done that before, and it does have a lot of benefits. Like, for example, you get better learning because you evaluate your learner better and your environment better, and you have a more well-rounded understanding of how that learning is going to take place. And almost most of all, you get better analytics. So after you do your training, you can get data to prove that your training has value and has success. And that's really big in instructional design, especially when you're in a corporation and you're trying to prove that what you're doing has value. Also, you have a really clear path to follow. A lot of times when I'm meeting with a client, they don't really know what they want, so I'm trying to figure out what they want, and that's part of systematic design as well, as evaluating the need. One of the limitations that I do see, though, is from what I saw in the book, there wasn't too much about your client and meeting with your client. And that's a big problem in instructional design for me, is when you do meet with your client, a lot of times they start out with an idea that they want, and then you start developing something and you give them a module for an example, and then they kind of change their mind and you go back and forth, and they keep wanting to change things. Sometimes you're launching the product in a week. This happened to me last week. I was launching a product, and I just kept getting emails from the legal department for changes, like literally till 10 minutes before I did a seminar to launch the product and show trainers how to use it so they can train other people. And so that's a big issue I personally have run into a lot, is just stuff with the client. I always do all the edits they want, but if I can find a way to input that into the systematic design model, then I think it would make it a more complete model to follow.